Money FM 89.3, best of breakfast. Mind your business, only on Money FM 89.3.
Yes, Money FM 89.3, Audrey, Siek, taking you through Mind Your Business today. Well, entrepreneurship is an exciting yet daunting endeavor. Raising $10 million in a seed funding round probably isn't something you would expect when you're first starting out. But one local entrepreneur did just that. Today, we're joined by Elston Sam, co-founder of Ethlas. That's a blockchain company focusing on security and gaming to help the next billion users get into the next phase of the internet dubbed Web3, to share more about how entrepreneurial education and mentorship played a part in guiding him through his entrepreneurial journey. Elston, welcome to The Breakfast Show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Morning. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you walk us through what I think has been an exciting career journey. We're very curious about how you started too. So we know you gained international exposure pretty early on, interning at companies like Airbnb and Jume during your exchange at Peking University. So that must have kind of ignited your passion for the tech industry. How did those experiences kind of influence your approach to building your own company?
Yeah, I think this was back in 2017, 2018, being immersed in the Chinese tech scene. It was very exciting. That was before, the whole WeChat mini program, Meituan really reached the western side of the world. So being directly there immersed, it was very eye-opening. I really distilled it into maybe 3 key learnings that still takes with me today. I think the first one was, I learned that don't ask questions you can Google, but not in a reprimanding way, but more in the sense of self-responsibility and self-initiative. I think that we should be able to understand our own problems and solutions so well that we can be the domain expert. When I was an intern there, they never scolded me or gave me a side eye when I asked a simple question, right? But they would just show me how they would pull a query or search for something in like 10 seconds. And that was a lot more impactful than just showing, right? Than just telling me. So I think that was the first. The second was it taught me that you should work hard, but don't neglect play. A few examples. One, my boss, who was the head of the product, he would be working really hard on the weekdays, and suddenly over the weekend, he would say, hey, I'm going for a marathon in Inner Mongolia for 2 days. I was like, what? You didn't tell me about this? So the fact that they prioritize work, but they also make sure that they prioritize and not neglect play. Or even when I was at Airbnb, after a successful launch, we would go for a nice dinner or a karaoke session, and all the bosses would just let loose and goof around compared to, in other cultures where they're maybe more reserved. So I think really seeing them firsthand play hard, work hard was a whole other meaning than just, reading about it in the book. And I think the last one, being immersed in the Chinese culture, is it taught me to read and expose myself extensively. Because I think the scariest mistake is you don't know what you don't know. Like my peers would read about tech-related books, but at lunch they're reading about astronomy, or in the group chats they'll be talking about Michelin chefs and the craft of it. So I think sometimes being creative or effective at work is to provide alternative perspectives, and one way to do that very easily is pattern matching across industries. So yeah, I think these are kind of my top 3 takeaways when I really got immersed at the start of the advent of the Chinese tech industry.
Wow. Okay. So mindful questions, work-life balance, and exposure and expanded knowledge. Some great lessons that you took away. So tell us what happened after you graduated. I believe it was 2018 when you graduated, and you started your career as a product manager at Grab first, right? Before making that leap into blockchain and decentralized finance. What was the driving force behind that transition?
Yeah, I think the time at Grab was actually quite pivotal. I really resonated with Grab's mission of wanting to drive Southeast Asia forward. And I've actually seen it in real life. We would do overseas immersion trips. So we went to Indonesia. We saw how a family of 5 was living in a very small shoebox apartment. And the dad would go out early in the morning to do deliveries. And they would come back. And just by the income of that was able to support a family of 5, right? And I think back to the business aspect of things, a marketplace platform like Grab or Carousel or Amazon, what it solves for is really information asymmetry. And in the ride-hailing context, how do you spread supply so that it's a win for drivers, a win for passengers. And just during that time, they were also starting the digital bank initiative. And just the thought on the possibility of banking the unbanked in Southeast Asia, that was very, very inspiring. So I think the allure of this concept of decentralized and transparent finance, where anybody could tap on it just like how the internet was, and that was very, very inspiring and made me feel like, hey, there is a greater impact to be done. And a few examples. One was we saw how countries in Africa, they basically skipped broadband, skipped laptop, and they went straight from shared landlines all the way to smartphones. So we thought that wouldn't it be just so much more efficient if consumers could all tap into a transparent financial network? So I think that was really the advent of it, where me and a couple of ex-colleagues all really got together, and that technical interest in a network matched by our own personal experience from a social cause perspective. I think those two was really a good mix mash of what led us to want to start something in this space and then build something that entrepreneurship journey.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like you had quite a positive experience at Grab, but I want to go back a little further and talk about your time at NTU. We understand that they actually have entrepreneurial education and mentorship built into the course. So can you tell us more about that and how that helped, shape your mindset as a founder?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was when I was just a young undergraduate. And like I mentioned earlier, right, one of the scariest things is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So I think for younger folks, a no-regret move is just to speak with experienced people. I remember in my schooling days, I would speak to my seniors, and they would tell me candidly, hey, your GPA matters maybe at your first job, but after that, no one really asks you about it. Everybody cares more about what was your experience, what was your skill set. So I think that was really, really helpful. It gave me perspective. It made me know that once I achieved my own target band of GPA, anything marginally more was marginal benefit already, right? So I think that really gave me the perspective of what I should be focusing on. At NTU, there's a program that I was part of. It's called the Overseas Entrepreneurship Program. What it did was it matched us overseas for an exchange program and an internship. So I think that was really what forced me and put me on this path of wanting to try something different. I think from an institutional perspective, there are probably two aspects. There are the hard resources where they have you write reports, they share you materials, but there are also the soft resources where they organize events, they connect you with industry leaders or past seniors. So I think the role that an institution can have for a very young, early, undergraduate, that was very, very pivotal. Even when I was in Peking University, so Peking University was like the top 2 universities in China. Right? If you count acceptance rate, it's probably much more difficult than the Ivy League schools. So going there, it was really, really eye-opening because the students there thought very, very broadly. And while I was on exchange, I actually did a startup in China as well. So I think that also was the proof in the pudding that such overseas experiences really gives you that hands-on try at startups. So I think really that catalyst that NTU played was just, hey, it's okay to try something. And so even when I started my first job, that seed was just always growing at me, and it was just always calling me. So I think when the time came, myself and my other co-founders just felt that it was the right time to have our hands at it.
Yeah, so Elston, mentorship often plays a key role when it comes to business decision making. And so I want to get into your company, Ethlas. Congratulations on your successful fundraising, which is a big challenge for many startups. So what was it like, navigating all of the challenges like securing funding and balancing innovation with commercial success? How did you manage to do all of that at such a young age?
Yeah, the honest truth is there is no playbook for entrepreneurship, because if there was, then everybody would be doing it. Then how do you have a situation where there's an arbitrage or an advantage, right? So I think the role of mentorship was very, very important. Over my last few roles, I still keep very close contact with my ex-colleagues, my ex-bosses. Even when I got married, my ex-bosses were all there because they played a much larger role than just being a boss. They were a life mentor. And even right now, when they went overseas or they changed jobs, we still keep in touch a lot. So I think those were very, very important. I think from a institution perspective, but also from a private perspective, there's a few things that, mentorships can offer. One, of course, from a school perspective, what can be in their capacity, right? They can link you up with other alumni. They can link you up with other professors. They can share you frameworks. But there are also things that are outside of their capacity that they still try their best. Right? They introduce you to industry leaders or they host events to connect you from people. Because I think the market keeps changing, so the playbook also keeps changing. It's hard to just rely on hard-printed resources or written resources because it might not be relevant 2-3 years ago, right? Who would have predicted that 2-3 years, that AI would be such a big application where government will allocate large budgets to it, every company would pivot into it. So I think being able to stay abreast of the latest news, being connected to people is probably the best thing that has worked for me. So even all the way from fundraising or hiring, they were just talking to ex-founders and learning it along the way.
Yeah, best to stay agile because, like you said, the playbook always keeps changing. I do want to touch on your leadership style. I know you talked about the importance of work-life balance that you learned, asking mindful questions, expanding your knowledge. So what is your leadership style when it comes to working with your team? Do you know? And do you find that your hires tend to be from a similar kind of generation?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'm 31 this year, but sometimes I already feel old among my young interns.
Oh my gosh, bite your tongue, Elston.
Exactly, when they show me about their TikTok trends or they teach me about trendy words, right? So I think relatively it's still a pretty young demographic, late 20s, early 30s. Two of my co-founders are industry veterans, so I think that helps to bring a lot of structure. In terms of my leadership style, I think it also boils back to a lot of my past experience. I started in a bank, like most NTU alumni, NTU graduates, we all feel that banking and finance is a very fun and interesting place. Funny enough, I didn't quite enjoy that because it felt that your role and seniority carried a lot more weight compared to my time in tech where anybody in the room could speak up. But of course, different contexts, legal constraints were different, but that was just how it felt. I think maybe two takeaways. One is youth nowadays, I think they value impact a lot more. So if they have the chance to lead, they have the chance to own a project, I think that matters to them. Youth now, I think, also prioritize a holistic career. Right? So they are also in a position to ask back to their bosses, their employers, hey, how can you support me so that I can, quote-unquote, work hard and not neglect play, like what I mentioned earlier. So I think that aspect of, career growth, learning and development is important. End of the day, I think, for me, it's just being genuine. I'm genuinely interested in, sharing about our company plans. How do I help them with their growth? How do we know them as people and not as employees, right? One of the best litmus tests we have when we hire people is in startups, the hours are long. Would you enjoy the company of the person sitting next to you if it's 11 p.m. at the office, right? So I think that's probably the best litmus test for both an employee point of view, but also an employer point of view.
Yeah, all right. And finally, before you go, Elston, we want to talk about the recent Budget 2025 announcements. As an entrepreneur, you must have been following some of the measures. What stood out to you this year? Do you think that this year's initiatives will be enough to support businesses like yours in this global economic climate?
Yeah, I think there's, of course, a couple of structural announcements that PM Wong made, from income tax rebates all the way to co-funding of wages. Two things really piqued my interest. The first was what he shared about the Global Founders Program. Interestingly, I was actually part of the early formation of that when we were involved with our work with EDB. We were, I think, the first 10 participants, and now it's expanded to 100 over. So I've definitely met a lot of good friends, had a few of them onto my podcast, and it's just amazing to actually know that so many experienced executives and founders have moved over in Singapore or, put Singapore as part of their stopover plan. So I think that soft skill, that soft osmosis of experience and knowledge is definitely helpful. The other thing that I felt was actually quite smart was what I think PM Wong mentioned about this online wallet, where instead of a reimbursement process, they go through like an online quick claim process. And this is a very, very real operational problem. I really think that they took the time to listen to the ground, because often what happens with these grants is that you make an application, it takes 2 or 3 weeks, and there's a really long reimbursement window. It comes after like 6 months. And for a young startup, just thinking in terms of weeks, it's hard to think in terms of months. So I think this is a very, very good solution because it solves a strong operational on-the-ground problem. But I think it boils back to the question, like, with this budget and the broader vision for Singapore, how do we encourage new bets and innovation? compared to catering to incumbents. But I can definitely resonate with the math. There is a clear ROI when you want to cater for incumbents compared to, betting on startups because success is so unpredictable. So I think it really boils back to what our aspirations are. Do we foresee Singapore's version of Silicon Valley to be one, the APEC hub for every matured MNC, or two, it's a thriving startup ecosystem, and if a few happens to be unicorn, why not, right? Something in the model of Israel. So I think it really boils back to the question, do we want to prioritize a immediate financial metric or a less immediate social economic ecosystem metric? So I think really it boils down to, how people see and what they really envision a Singapore business ecosystem for ourselves.
All right, some great insights into what measures entrepreneurs are looking at this 2025 budget and the beginning of blockchain company Ethlas. Thanks so much for joining us, Elston, and for sharing your journey with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We've been speaking with Elston Sam, co-founder of Ethlas. Keep it here on Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.